Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what part of the world you're watching this from. And welcome to Canvas, an event by Shuzia to help Christian creatives, set the pace for the rest of the year. My name is Misa, and over the period of this week, we'll be talking to amazing creatives who will take us through their stories, take us through their journeys, and together we would uncover insights that will help us shape the rest of the year so that we can go out and, like the scriptures say, do exploits. So let's rush straight into it. You did not come to see my pretty face. You came to be part of amazing conversations. And today we have someone. But before I mention his name, shoot, I should have said yeah. But let's pretend like I did not say what I said first, right? Before I mention their name, the person is a writer of songs and poems from Cross River State. Like I've heard them sing. I've heard the songs, I've read their poems, fantastic stuff. They have written and co-written many songs and poems with over 100 poems compiled into two yet to be published poetry books. I think we need to update this because there's a poetry book that was just released and it's fantastic. You should go check it out. But we'll get right to that. And two music projects already in the public domain. Most recently, the album Welcome to My Joy. When he is not creating art, Koli is an IP tech lawyer with a passion for helping creatives and startups maximize their potential for sustainable growth at scale. However, although mostly recognized for his work, Koli identifies first and foremost as a child of God. So, I've given up his name. Yeah, so yes, you are here. Welcome, Koli. I will start this with a story you have not heard before. I promise you have not heard. I don't know if I should say this because, I don't know many people, and it's somewhat of a personal thing, but it's interesting. So I will go on and say it. I'm getting married very soon. And in the process of thinking of what's the word? They use hashtags now. We use hashtags for weddings. So what the hashtag for the wedding will be. I was scratching my head, and I just stopped at my piece, right? So I don't need to break everything down, but a combination of our names. That's it. With American pronunciation, and today, literally today, I don't know how my thought process came to be. But it was okay, yeah, I wanted to listen to your album today, and it's Welcome to My Joy. And I was oh, welcome to my peace. That would have made a pretty good wedding, this thing. Why did I not think about it since? So yeah, it's a fantastic body of work. I'm sure we'll talk about it a little more later. But yeah, minus this rousing or semi-rousing introduction I've given, please could you introduce yourself? Let our audience get a feel of you and your raw pulsating heart.
Thank you so much, Mr. And congrats again. I've said it 1 million times, but congrats again on
Thank you. We're trying our best.
becoming one. My name is Koli Akpet, and I'm from Cross River State, as my bio said. And I write music and poetry, and I'm a Christian. That's why I'm here. So I'm glad to be here and very, very eager to have this conversation.
It's fantastic having you. So if you do not know, if you just stumble, let's say you were on the street of YouTube and then you saw my handsome face and started to pop in and don't really know where we're going on here. Today we're going to be talking about managing creative expectations. And this topic, I think every topic that we are going to take in the course of like this period is dear to my heart. But um, this topic is one that is always fresh in my heart, because it's something that I believe helps me recalibrate every single time. It's something that helps me, set where I want to be. It kind of like forms a framework for how I operate as a person, as a creative. And one thing I don't think many people learn when they get into creative life is managing expectation. And so I would share, a bit of a story, and then we can get this conversation rolling. So I never really wanted to do a 9 to 5, right? Um, and I've always wanted to do something creative, something artistic. And it seems very possible. It is very possible. When I say it seems, I hope people don't feel like one kind of way, but it is possible. However, years of consuming people saying you can do it, and not really people going into the meat and potatoes of like the creative practice um got me to a place that when I actually started you know living or working creatively was this very intention. So um, in things like finances, right? In subjects or things that come to fame or popularity, in the context of how well or the quality of art even produced, um, and how all these things kind of like work together, and it's an easy way to kind of like dampen um one's spirit. And it was like that for a bit. It's like we all know the struggling artist trope, but many of us don't sit down to really think about this and kind of like plan our lives in our creative endeavors in a somewhat realistic fashion. And this is why this topic is important to me, is because there are so many people who want to be artists, so many people who want to express themselves creatively, and who, in more ways than they realize, are swayed by, the glamour and swayed by the finished product. That we do not have systems in place to manage expectations and to, hold on to like some tangible understanding of how the creative world is like, and how we should temper our expectations. And that's kind of like what this is. And I think it's like a very fitting start to this, because what is the best way to say, plan your year amazingly, right? But here are some important things to watch out for. So I'm very happy to have this conversation really. And I've had it in some form over the years. I say over the years, over the while. And let's go into it. So you are a poet, you are a singer. I will always say poet first, right? Because I identify first as a poet. Creatively. Um, how has that journey been? Give us kind of like what was your introduction into like the arts, poetry, and music, and how was that journey so far?
So, thank you, Mr. That's actually a very interesting question. I would say honestly that I stumbled into the arts. I didn't intend to be artistic or be in the arts, or I didn't even know that what I was doing was the arts. It was just vibes. It was just default. That was what I was introduced to music because music was played in my house all the time. And I say this because growing up, I thought that's how everybody's house was. But now I know that not necessarily. My father
Yeah.
played reggae and blues and yanni. classical music, and so there was diversity. And I heard, okay, I heard high life. I heard so my palette was already being trained from very early. Then I went to then in primary school. At about 5 or 6 thereabouts, I joined a classical music program in school. So what they'll do is they'll make some people pianists,
Yeah.
violinists. So they get the ones for instruments and then the ones for singing. And then you sing that, if you know anything about classical music, you know there are 4 parts. And then so even as young as we were, the smallest choir, we were divided into small parts. And I was, as you know, boys are usually put in tenor and bass. And so I sang tenor all through primary school. And interestingly, the same classical program was in my secondary school. So I sang tenor up to SS3. I also did music up to SS2, which is, for those who aren't familiar with the West African system, which is the 5th year in high school. And so I studied music till the 5th year, and I sang in the choir from maybe like 5 years old till I was done with high school. So that was my background in music. Then church. I was also in the church choir. I sang church music. I sang a cappella. I sang, everything that was available in church, I sang, And but poetry, a bit different. My journey with poetry was a bit different. I started with essays. So I didn't always write poetry. I didn't know about the art form. There wasn't a lot of poetry books in my library. So my parents are academics. My dad is a university professor. And so I grew up with a bookshelf. You know how people have like movies and stuff? We also had shelves of books. And so there was Animal Farm, My Odyssey, so books by Nnamdi Azikiwe, books that like people read, and so that's what I was, that things fall apart. Those were the kind of books that we read. I don't remember ever seeing a poetry book in the shelf and like being ever given a poetry book. So I didn't know about the art form until much, much later in life. So most of what I wrote were essays. In primary school, they would say, write an essay about your holiday, and everything. And my mom was a journalist for years, and she used to be editor of this paper, this local magazine. And so she would give me an opportunity to write a column in write an article, write a column. So when I write for essay competitions and I don't get picked, she would still publish the essays and stuff. So that's what I wrote up until maybe SS1, literature and English, where we started studying poetry as a subject proper. And then I started reading poems and fell in love with poems. I started writing poems for people. We would have like small tournaments, nothing that deep, nothing serious or organized, but we would all write poems. People would read it, people would talk about it. And so it wasn't you were a dead guy for writing poetry. You weren't like the most popular guy in school. It wasn't, but I think that was the first time I saw what the power that poetry could have, with like what it could do to somebody to read something you had written about them, a nice thing that was written about them when they didn't ask you. You wrote, and there's poetry has, it's very dramatic, it's very colored, and it has a way of feel seen. And also, if people are not so great, we can write over them with poems, write over their mistakes and their flaws. And so I saw what it could do. And prior to sharing, for me, it was therapy. I would write the things I couldn't say, the things I'd never admitted, the things I was struggling with, I would write. And so poetry changed me first before I started changing people through me. And so this is how I got into poetry and music.
Fantastic. I wish I went to your school. I have a friend, and he'll be coming up much later. And he teases me because I didn't like poetry in school.
Really?
I didn't like poetry. Poetry felt like punishment. And I always felt like we were imposing our bills on the writers. So it's like,
I also felt poetry was a bit pretentious because the writer isn't there to tell us what it might not be that deep. Analyze, and we say, what was the
writer? And like your school, I don't know, but somehow your school feels cool. Mine is,
This is the first
not be
time I'm
that
hearing that
poetry
from
guy.
you. Thanks.
No, because I am imagining, right? I am imagining what sort of poet I would have been if I started
That was your
writing
introduction.
some, yes, if I started writing some maybe 4 years before I wrote my first poem, right? And if it was from a more intentional place and a place of love, um, what that would have been. Because and I say that for quite a few creatives, is that for many poets I've talked to, poetry comes and you said something like that, I alluded to that. Poetry comes from like a place of darkness. It's you write things that you're feeling have really voice out. And those are things that were not really explained. In a very weird way. And I tell anybody who gets to listen, the way poetry is that everybody feels like you have to be a certain way to be a poet, right? Like it's very easy for people to identify with, oh, I'm a writer, oh, I'm a singer, right? Without wondering whether they are like amazing at it. But people that say I'm a poet often feel that I am a good, at least I am like, for the majority of people that are brave enough to say I'm a poet, it seems to come with like this invisible tag that says, oh, I know a lot of like literature and stuff and I'm pretty good at what I'm doing. And so like there's this kind of like
Because it's a minority within a minority. You have to like be a certain person to write poetry.
to write poetry. So that was kind of what it was for me. Like when I'm hearing this story and I'm like, you guys used to have contests on poetry. It's like,
Yeah.
That's so cool. Maybe I would have been, much interested in poetry, and I'll not have that my friend teasing me how many how many years.
The thing is, it might not be what you think, or because we marked the poetry, we talked, and we were all novices. We didn't know anything. So perhaps what we would look for was rhyme, and then maybe vulnerability. That's what would be amazing, but not necessarily rules. And I used to think that the fact that I didn't have like very, very intentional formal training to become an artist, that was one of my pitfalls as an artist, one of the things that my weaknesses as an artist, until people started saying, oh, this sounds so original. I was like, original means it's different from what people usually read. But original also could be no training, lack of training, so maybe that's also your strength, because you never learn to write in between the lines.
Within the context of like, like more structure and so to speak. I think I can understand that.
Because I really enjoy your poetry. Like you're pretty up there for me. But anyway,
okay. But yeah, so let's look at this, right? So you have talked about, and I think this is a very sweet segue, is that you have talked about, doing poetry in school and that being like one of your first introductions. What was your process like, or what was it like, starting? So I think I need to preface this better. Sorry, I'm thinking in my head and I'm talking to myself. But the idea is you started music earlier than you started poetry, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want you to be very sided and my bias to totally win. But what was your experience, or what did you have any dreams, right, when you started poetry? And let's go through that first. Did you have any dreams regarding like poetry and music when you started there?
So can I be very honest with you? I think everybody else thought I could be an artist except me. And I was the last person to admit that this was a thing that I could do, or that this is something I could pursue, or that I'm so passionate about it. Because in my I've seen and I've experienced so many starving artists that that was not going to be me. That was not going to be my life. That was not going to be my option. And like I said, my parents are very, my family is very, like, my brother is a doctor and my sister is an architect and I'm a lawyer, and my youngest is a teacher. We are very, we are very academic process.
Family, yeah.
Family, so to just become an artist, it takes pressure. It takes pushing against resistance to become. So it's harder to say you're an artist to want to be an artist in that kind of family than it is to be any other thing. So
yeah,
people would think, oh, it's hard to be a lawyer. It's harder to be an artist in where I come from, or to admit I am. Also, looking around, how representation matters. I don't know think of the big stage, the big names. Who do you know from Calabar?
I think I know one person, but that's a more recent thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So what that does to you is that you don't quite see it. When your father is a doctor, you think you can be a doctor. When you watch TV and you see Black people on TV, you think you can act. But when in your society you don't know anybody who's trying to be an artist, you've never seen anybody want to be an artist and succeed. As a child, you don't dream to be an artist. And to be honest, I never had any dreams to be an artist until I started failing. Until I started experiencing a lot of, I still get a lot of rejections, a lot of doors closing in my face, a lot of things started shaking my big plan. And that's when art was a conversation I was ready to have. And I started wondering, could it, and then I started meeting people. I met my first manager and he said, what, just show up in the studio. You don't have to do anything, just sing. I'll handle the rest of it. And so NYSC was the first time I even allowed myself to think that this could be it. Prior to that, I was just going to practice law, teach law. My life was going to be, straight and narrow, the straight and narrow path. But yeah, anyway, that's me.
Could you lead us? You said that there were a lot of failures, and that kind of like shaped you or kind of like shocked you into believing that, okay, I can actually do this art thing, right? So if I'm not pushing too much, could you share a bit of like what the failings were? And
so Misa, we are here for this. This is the conversation we are here to have. So go in.
No problem.
So my first experience with failure was 9 years old when I repeated a class in primary school. Who repeats a class in primary school? But I did. And I remember the headmaster in primary school had said to my parents that, this boy could be something. If only he could just have something really, like something happen to him, something shake him, something make him want to wake up, and I think this is it, and this might be our only window to do this. And I remember my mom had so many issues with it. She was like, oh yeah, you traumatize this child. Kids are mean, guys. Kids are really mean. And when you repeat a class in primary school, there's a lot that goes with it, especially in a primary school where you played from end to end, so everybody knew you. So anyway, I eventually did, to cut the long story short, I eventually did repeat that class. But interesting story, that became the beginning of my academic success. Prior to that, I'd never really done anything deep, or I don't think I'd even become like the 20th in class ever, but then I topped the class the 3 terms. I was third best in the state in the common entrance. I went to high school. Then I started failing again. I started struggling to, find my way to the top in high school. It took me up until JS3 to eventually figure out how to hack secondary school. I always say to people that life is hard, education is easy, because what you put inside you is what you give out, and what you give out, if what you give out is what was taught or what is being asked, you'll get it right. But in life, it's not like that. You can work your whole life, and but it's education is a bit more predictable, and I quite enjoyed it. had a very conducive environment to be an academic child that's doing well in school. SS1, 2, 3, I was in the arts class, and I quite enjoyed it because I didn't feel the pressure because I was doing well to go to the science class. I knew by JS3 that the arts was what I wanted to do, and what I was most comfortable in. And so I did it. I enjoyed government. I did well in school through senior secondary school, and then I went to uni, and then I graduated with the first class. I also found uni quite easy. Then I went to law school, and so everything I went to law school in 2014. Every plan I had between 2015 and 2022 last year, I don't think that there were up to 5 that actually worked. I don't think that, like, I in fact, prior to 2014, I was a plan A guy. Everything I wanted, I must get. And I used to say, yes, I'm a person that goes for what I want and I always get it. Worked for me till 2014. I started learning that I needed to have other options, that you needed to compromise, that you needed to consider another thing, that you needed to make space for other options. And this is not how I live my life up until this point. And so then I began my battle with serious depression because I don't know if there was this time I went to this church and the pastor was talking about identity crisis and how when you attach your identity to things that can change, for instance, academic success, top of the class, money, things, and your job, your career, your this, when that thing is taken away, you have a meltdown. That was me for many, many years. And so yeah, go on.
Can I just so I have like a short memories thing, but this thing of identity that you said, I think there is something to it about, you know how you go out, right? You go for an event and somebody asks you, oh, how are you? You're getting to introduce yourself. And they're like, what do you do? Who are you? Those type of questions. And it becomes, at least for me as a person, up until maybe it hasn't totally solved itself, that there is that conflict as to who am I and attaching my importance to, like,
because you know things. That what they're asking you is not who are you, they are asking you what do you do.
What do you do?
And why are you, why should we respect you? That's what they're really asking.
I think we should really just answer who we are, but that's another question, right? Because who are we? But you know, that was kind of like a thought, and it's also something that I think every creative person would have to grapple with when they're coming into like their creativeness, is that who am I? Especially if you're the type of creative who is not grounded in just one thing, right? The question of who am I becomes it begins to weigh on like your creativity. But that's kind of like an aside I wanted to talk about. So you were talking about like going to church in 2014 and the pastor talking about, you know, everybody attaching their importance to
the identity. To some people's identity is in a relationship. So give whatever it is that you want to say, no matter how toxic it gets, no matter how abusive it gets, they can't leave because they cannot, like, they don't know themselves apart from this person. I think that art can also become very toxic, can become a very toxic place. People sabotage so that they can write about pain. People people hurt their partners and then go and write about like how they've been hurt. You know, people do art, especially the kind of art that we do, you know, sometimes it can control you if you don't have like a grip of it. So something that's been happening to me recently is that I've had to also disassociate my who I am from what I do in terms of even art. I'm not, because what happens if, and for those of us that are Christians, what happens when you feel led to not write anything this year? Like maybe you write in your room but not put out anything this year. Can you be that disciplined to not? Because there's something I read on Chandler Moore's page about purpose and assignment. I know when we start calling our assignment our purpose, it's a problem, and when we start calling our purpose our assignment, it's a problem, because assignments will change. I may not be in a position where I'll be able to, for those, like, you know, you're getting married and like you have start having like real responsibilities apart from yourself. You start having like real bills, and then, you know, an opening comes up in a company that doesn't allow you to, and you know you have to be this for the next 2-3 years. Do you have the discipline to be able to be like, sometimes we hide behind the fact that I'm a creative, don't try to change me, you know, and everything. But I feel like times and seasons happen to us all. And sometimes a season is going to require that you be something else. And you must be disciplined enough to be able to rise up to the occasion. And so I think that for me, I'd had an identity crisis and a meltdown for years because I kept on seeing my prayer points being answered in other people's lives. You know, I even had people message me, I didn't even apply for this scholarship and I just got it. I was applying for tens and tens and tens of scholarships and I wasn't getting even into one program. You know, I had the first class and I was looking for a job. I was going from place to place, you know. And so I think in that space, because music and the art had always been there for me, I had enough material to create, and I created and I exercised with all my might, and I started sharing. And so that's where you know, my art was there for me when other things that depended on were not able to be there for me. So this is what my experience with failure looked like.
So it's right. So let's talk a bit more about like identity. Creative identity. How did you figure out what spaces you wanted to be in? So right now you say I'm a singer, I'm a poet. Was there ever a time where they were fighting? And I know that happened to me personally, but I want to know if there was a time where those two things fought for like attention and how you kind of like sorted them out.
So one thing I decided to do is to be Koli. And so if you invite Koli to a thing, you'll get Koli, and whatever it is that I feel led to perform is what I'll perform, except you had a special request. So most times, so there was a time when I was getting so many invitations for poetry, to come perform poetry, but I prefer to write poetry than to perform poetry. I enjoy the spoken word art form so much, but it's just not me. Sometimes it always feels a bit pretentious. It feels like acting. And because I've performed most of my life, I know the difference. And I feel like the audience can always call your bluff. They will always know when you're uncomfortable, when you're faking, when you're not being 100% honest, when you're not being vulnerable, when you're not telling the truth. It's obvious, you know, so they can tell. And many people say, oh, I'm not performing for artists. But the truth is, you should give the audience a lot of credit. They know where they came to see. You know, and so what I started doing is that I would just take my guitar and I would sing and talk to people, genuinely talk to people, and have conversations and sing, tell my story, sing, ask people how they are, you know. And so whether you call me for poetry or for music, I'll do what I felt most comfortable doing that fit into the theme of your events. And so that's what I've always done. I never struggled with poetry or music or whatever it was. But to be honest, I feel most comfortable writing poetry and I feel most comfortable performing music. So they are not exactly the easiest to marry, but I've found conversation to be an easier place because I've learned that with words, it's easier for me to do it on the spot than for me to rehearse it and do it. So it's, or rather not easier, more natural. So I just do my thing.
I wonder what the experience is. So very high key. There is this thing, right, where I have been very much about, what's the word? I have been very much about this idea of the experience, right? Of the experience of an art form. And you know, when you talked about singing and then talking to the audience, I'm just imagining what that experience is, right? Because I know there are people who do that, but it's not like the most popular style of relating with. I'm just intrigued at that. It's a side note. It's just something. If anybody is listening, I think that there is something to authenticity. Um, Finding the voice that works for you, and creating an experience that's memorable for like the audience that you serve. And that's fantastic. I have something here, right? Um, and I think there are two things. There are two things I kind of want to tackle. Is first of all, so here it's like waiting for things to shake you. You spoke about, and this is going back to go forward. You spoke about the years that shook you, right, and took you up to this point. A couple of years ago, um, I was taking stock of my life. I think it was probably about 2 years now. I'm not very amazing. So like 2 3 years.
These are my. I don't know what happened.
2 3 years. So about 2 3 years ago, and I have been doing poetry since I think 2014, if I'm not mistaken. Similar, under similar guises, I was studying law, and I knew I didn't want to practice, and it was a very sore spot for me. And I could not change because in my house, I come from a line of lawyers, so you have to state your case and you have to argue your point very well. And to be honest, I just wasn't feeling law. Not feeling law is not a good enough excuse to not practice law. Um, and so that was kind of like what formed like the first form. And stumbled upon poetry. I think I listened to Jefferson Breath. He had this very popular poem on why I love Jesus but hate religion. He blew up at that time. Then P4CM was a thing, and listening to Ezekiel Azonwu and Jackie Hill Perry, and
let's not forget
genetic. Yeah, so I the funny thing, the reason why the reason why Ezekiel Azonwu is like the first name that really comes to mind is because his was poetry I could relate so much to, right? In the sense of there was the artistic flair, but like there was this slowing down, like I don't
he
think.
He also did a lot of play on words, just like you.
Yes. There's this thing that he did. There's this line. I think I heard it last in 2017, but it was that the blood that was spilled was never in vain. He did this. I can't remember this thing. And like the double entendre. Anybody who knows poetry understands that line. And I was very fascinated because it was a slow style. I don't really like battle type this thing, and but like those were like the people that I kind of listened to and kind of like modeled my life or my art after. What was the question I was asking again? Because you just got into like this. This okay, waiting for something to shake you. And doing that, and I was doing poetry in school. That's what people knew me for. I was in choir. So I think that's another part people don't really know about me because I don't bring it out so much as I'm learning how to manage that. Is I was in choir also, but like I didn't really want to sing out. I really wanted to do more poetry. But there were all these things, and it was building out. And after school, I was part of different communities. And I was in communities where I was meeting people who were coming up with me, right? And then 2 years down the line, nobody knows me, right? And these people that were like my contemporaries, right, were doing amazing things. And it was like, okay, I cannot blame other people for, where I am, right? There is that idea of, taking personal responsibility. But it is like, I have to take personal responsibility. Okay. It got to the point where I was taking stock of my life, and I realized that, what, I need to take personal responsibility, right? And what I can do to, be more out there. And so, I joined, I started like that was when I actually started putting out my stuff. And one of like the things I put out was this project Old Wine New Moons, and basically the idea was we wait for uh okay, we wait for things to shake us to take action, right? So there's a theory I heard of that when things are very hard, that's when we decide to take very drastic measures. If things are mildly hard, right, in our skin, um, if there we are not forced, we are not really forced to take action. So, for instance, let's say you have to work like 10 kilometers, right? Um, you would you can say, okay, I know to get money, let me walk this, right? But if you have like maybe 20 miles to go, you will find a faster way to get to that place with like the resources that you have, or you are forced to create resources or get resources to get that thing sped up. But I feel like there's a problem there, and I do not know if you're also experienced this in your artistic life, as you can't always wait. As much as it is sweet and it is great for things to jolt us into action, it isn't the Stephen Pressfield in War of Art said this thing, right? He said that, and I'm paraphrasing, that there is something that the professional knows that the amateur doesn't, and that is basically to show up, right? And so, what has that been? Have you, starting from this point? I think this is where I'm going to. Starting from this point where it is like there were a series of events that kind of like jolted you into taking more drastic action with art, right? Um, how has your practice of art been built? Is it out of being jolted, or have you gotten into a rhythm of showing up? And what were your expectations? What were the things you learned? If there was this change, I guess, what were the things you learned between being jolted and showing up?
So, Nisa, I don't glorify suffering in life or in art. I think it's overrated. I think that writing from pain and other things are like, yeah, they're overrated. I also another thing that is overrated: writer's block. I think that writer's block is for those who have the luxury of like not having to create. You get to go for months without doing stuff, and that's also fine. But if you have to, you will. It's important to also know at the back of your mind that if you have to, you will. What I'll say about my own personal experience is that I used to think that I write when I have inspiration, but I've gotten to the point where I can call upon inspiration. Hunger is enough inspiration to write. Needed to make money is enough inspiration. Everything is inspiration. I also think that the reason why a lot of people have gone months without writing is because they are trying to write something good and perfect. It's not that they cannot write. Yeah. So I don't put pressure on myself to write a masterpiece every time I pick up my pen, or to the same way I don't think that Leonardo da Vinci was trying to create. Well, I don't know these people personally, so I don't know. They might have put pressure on themselves, but they are not my standard, and so I don't have to. One of the things that happens when you put out a project that people, it's fairly liked, is that you want to top it with the next one, and you want to top it with the one after. But I've myself from that thing. I've released myself from the pressure. I didn't put out my book until December, even though I'd had it since 2020, because I felt like I'd fallen out of love with most of the poems, and I felt like, oh, this will not do anything for anybody. How will I ask someone to pay for this? Well, how do I know? How do I know these poems are in this book? Because they changed my life. The person I am today is standing on these poems, and they can do this for somebody else too. Same thing with the music I put out. Now I'm trying to put out I've tried to put out music. Every time I've gone to the studio and I've sent to people, they're like, oh no, this is, the last thing I created in the studio, some people were saying, some like community people were saying to me that, I don't really think it's that great. And that shattered me at first, and I was like, oh no, I'm not going to put it out. But the truth is, who the hell do I think I am? I'm not Kanye West or Jay-Z or say. I don't have to create I don't have to deliver at that level. There's no pressure to accept inside me to deliver at that level every time. I think that what I owe my community is to create honestly and do the best I can do. At the time I was recording that thing, I was singing at my best. I definitely am not coming to any studio. Anybody that knows me knows I'm never doing anything 50%. I'm never bringing 70% to any studio or any mic, even in church. And there's, sometimes I'm like, so if you want someone to like not bring it, you pick someone else and I'll do backup gladly. But if you ask me to do it, I'll do it like it's do or die. That's how I am about anything that has to do with my art. I strongly believe I have only one chance to be the new guy, and that's my chance to knock it out of the park. So I would, even if whether there's a crowd of 20 people or 20 million, my performance will probably be the same because I'll be trying to put out my best every time, with what resources I have. Art is also money, with what resources I have, with what people I'm are ready to do the work with me and stuff. But that is where I am, and that's who I am, and that's what I believe, and those are my thoughts on the topic. But I think also it's important. You should also learn to laugh at yourself sometimes and be like, and take them all too seriously. Artists have the tendency to overrate themselves and take themselves too seriously. It's not that deep. Sometimes it's that deep. Sometimes it's not that deep, and your job is to create. That's it, like any other job. I've never thought at work that when I used to work at a law firm that I have to win every case or have to do it. I felt my job was to look at the facts of the case, to build a good case for my client, and to go and fight for my client with all my life. The outcome was not up to me. So why, as an artist, do I put the pressure on every song to make me blow? So I didn't do that with any other job that I've ever done in my life. We used to work at a hotel, and my job when I worked at the hotel was to come to work every day and put in the most energy I can put in. Now that I'm an art, I'm pursuing art, I don't take a different mentality to work. I believe some people will like some of my work and some people will not, and that's just
definitely. I remember having there's a friend that we talk about every quarter. We just balance it, like, oh, what have you worked on recently? Out of the just call like once every quarter to kind of like give updates. I remember, one time we were talking about, that the big problem of, wanting to put out amazing work all the time. And, the conclusion of that conversation was that it is my job to do my best, right? And then I leave the judgment to the audience. And I think on that point of, we do not laugh at ourselves. Maybe it's a suggestion, and maybe you might want to take this. You might want to run onto projects that are not serious, right? Maybe just work on projects that are funny and don't have many things attached to them. Or
I think especially as Christian creatives, we have that bias. We are not just we are not entertained. Chill,
I definitely understand that. But at the end of the day, it's like this is another conversation we'll have. But there's also the part of it, the enjoyment, the relaxation, and the gifts you are given should not be extra burdens on us, right? I was talking with someone, and maybe I'm referencing this thing, but there's this idea that maybe the reason we have this problem is that we have made gods of ourselves, right? In that sense, that thing that we ought not to feel, that everything we should create is perfect or ought perfect. And it's at the end of the day, all we get to do is
we are made gods. Is that what you said?
We have made gods. We have made gods or idols of ourselves, right? I think idols signify and bring us.
So everything we do has to be on God level.
Yes, it's we have to do stuff that it's vastly better than what we have done before. And a lot of it comes from this space of what we consume. And if you're a good artist, you learn to consume good work, right?
Consume and you make truly.
You make good work.
Too.
Yes. But then there's also this thing of you can't immediately make the great work that you have heard, right? There has to be that process. And a lot of times our first reaction is to want to get the banger out of the gate, right? And be that. And that it's unnecessary pressure. It's unnecessary. As somebody who is almost always there, I know it's unnecessary pressure. I know that the time I've had the most fun in my art when every week I decided to test a new idea out. And maybe this is for somebody like this. Like, don't take your art too seriously per se, just show up. And the more you get to do the work, the better you get. The more you're able to analyze patterns and sharpen your sword and get to like the point where you have seen other people get to, or to kind of like fulfill the dreams you have for your art. But that is where that is. It's that we want to always create on like this very high level, and it's never really like that. There is also this expectation. I touched about it briefly. It's like you said, because art takes money, right? And like I said in the beginning of this thing, is I didn't want to have a 9 to 5. I didn't want to have like a regular job, right? Because I wanted to be an artist. But I realized that, well, a lot of prodding from my partner, that you need money to do this art thing, right? But it's not just money. Money isn't the only thing you need. You also need to leverage like relationships. And I have stories upon stories upon that, but like, projects I've worked on. But tell us what, your experience with making money and art, and then leveraging also relationships, leveraging the resources that you have to create art at the level that you can. Can you take us through what that process is and what that story has been for you, or what that journey?
So I came to Lagos to be an artist. I didn't come to Lagos to work, work a 9 to 5 either. I think by the time I was done with NYSC, I was very ready to, come and storm the world with my gifts. A few months later, after a lot of hunger and a lot of starvation, I dusted my CV. I went to look for jobs. And, I thought that was me just, now I know it to be responsibility. You're also your responsibility. It's your responsibility to take care of yourself and not let your art, consume you. Not let your music, your work, whatever it is, that whatever art you create, it's your responsibility to use it and not let it use you. To use it to glorify God, use it to serve people, and not to let it like become master and ruler of you. That's also idolatry. God didn't give us gifts so that they are going to, take over who we are. And first and foremost, you're a child of God, and wherever you are, whatever you have to do, especially I started working and I continued creating. One of the things I told myself is that there's no shortcut. I was looking for shortcuts. I was trying to do singing competitions, win a singing competition, become a thing, But I realized that everybody has gone through their process, and I shouldn't run from my process. In your process, you meet your community, you grow your community, you meet your people, you meet your partners, you meet the people that will do the work with you. There's so much that you build in the process. It's like building a house, and you just want someone to drop it, but you drop it on the foundation and then you start living in it today. That's very possible. It can happen. They've made homes very interestingly in very interestingly short times. However, what you miss out on when you don't go through the process is that you miss out on all the people and all the experiences. I've also started learning that the process is the destination. We spend so much time in the process. We don't spend that much time at the final stage. Ask any artist, they'll tell you their peak period is like maybe 3 years or 2 years. You have only like, no matter how popular pop artist, you have like maybe 2 years, 3 years to be topping the charts and to be the biggest deal in town. After that, the conversation will move. Maybe you'll still be a thing, but the conversation will move to other people. You'll not be number one forever. Every day is not your day, guys. You need to like also come to terms with that. The ovation will not always be for you. You need to learn to stand in the sidelines and clap for people. And that's just life, that's just discipline. And I started and I started creating my portfolio, started displaying myself to create art consistently, put it out there. learn to connect with an audience, perform in places where I'm not paid. I can't count how many places I've been paid for performing, in my entire journey as an artist, if I'm being very honest with you guys. And just do the work. Now I feel ready. I feel like I feel ready. I feel competent enough to ask people for money, to say this is what I should be paid. But I didn't always feel this way. And so I felt like it was okay for me to perform for free. If I don't feel confident enough to ask, I probably shouldn't be asking, And I would say differently to other people now, but this is just my own story and where I was. And so I worked. So I was able to, pay my bills and stuff from my work as a lawyer and all the other things I did, and then I continued creating art. But one of the things that God said to me about my art when I started creating is that I must harness the art of making do. Everything I needed was within my community. And guys, every project I've created, it came from my community. I didn't go to meet some person who was, the biggest producer in the world. Everything that I've ever put out was made by maybe my sister or my brother or my friend or my colleague at work. Somebody in my community always came through to just as it was laid in my heart, and that is what I've always done. I would create this ring light I have. Someone gave it to me when I put out a video. One of the first videos I put out in the during the lockdown, I put out a video. It was dark. It was beautiful, actually. I see you just as you are, and I call you beautiful. And someone said, "Oh, that's a lovely song, but the video is too dark. I'll send you a ring light." That's what happened. And just last week, I put out a video of me reading poetry, and someone said, "Oh, I want to buy you a new phone." And I've been thinking about getting an iPhone to improve my content. And someone has paid for it. It has always been the provision and the things have always the album I put out. I was putting out music during the lockdown. People started sending me money to produce the thing, to produce the music. And so it has always. There's not been any breakthrough like that. Maybe it will come, but there's never been a very big breakthrough that came from some person. I've never known you before. I just saw you on YouTube, and it has always been my people and my community and my friends, my family, and people who my friends have talked to me about. People taking care of my living rooms. And so that's my story, and that's been my journey. So I also have learned from my journey not to look down on the people around me and not to take people for granted, because my testimony has always come from my very small growing community. So my 2 fans are not like a joke to me. That's yeah.
I'm pretty sure you have more than 2 fans though. From what I'm saying, I'm pretty sure you have more than 2 fans. Anyhow, I think this is very important. Because we do not realize going in the beginning how much work and how much resources it takes.
But bro, we also do not realize how much we have already.
No, yeah. So that's where I'm going to. That's where I'm going to. It's you're hit with 2 things, right? As a beginner who wants to become more professional, right? Is that there's so much that needs to be done, that needs more resources, right? And oftentimes you fall into the trap of believing that it's only money that can solve those problems. Now, so what I've grown telling friends of mine who want to be artists is that, see, to be honest, get a job. You are most likely to get more money getting a job, right, than the first few years of doing your art. And that's fine. There's nothing to be ashamed of for that, right? Some people can go through their whole artistic career, so to speak, and not earn a dime. We're going to be talking about money making in next, but that's a whole different thing. But the thing is, when we met with this responsibilities and this, thing to scale, we forget that we have people. So, for instance, my first project, right, was it was handled by friends. It was produced by friends that in school I used to help them to complete their songs and give them creative ideas and stuff to do their work. And so when we hook up back in Lagos, it's guy, I have this idea. How far? It's no be you. Let's run that. and people who are like, oh, I have heard some of your work and you're doing this thing, let's support that. And it has been it has been my observation that for every stage you are in life, God has given you things that you are almost always, for the most part, thinking that the things we need are other things, right?
Guy,
Things are things are out of
God
our
always
reach.
plants Eden before he brings Adam. Like it's always
Yeah,
facts. You might not know that this
word.
is it because it's always the thing. Like if God is calling you to a thing, but I feel like there are a lot of people who are forcing themselves on art. It's not for them. Perhaps they are art enthusiasts or stuff, but it's not their job. It's not going to be the thing that is going to make them like the thing. Or for some of them, it's
Brings
ministry.
them out,
For
yeah.
people, it's a lot
Yeah.
of things for different people, but as their day job, not as many people as claim to be artists will have it be their day job, But one thing I always say one thing I would advise people to do is get into a community. If you can't get into one, create one and serve there. For a lot of people want people to serve them, but they don't want to serve anybody. I remember when I was just beginning to try to become an artist. I remember my friend Salem. He had they had this community of people who Instagram pods. They were like they would create engagement and try to hack the Instagram algorithm for the posts that they were putting out and everything. And it was such a hard community to get into, and I knew I didn't have the discipline at that time for that community. I realized, and I started realizing later, that everybody's trying to get into this community of people that are already doing well. And it's hard to get into that community, but you can build your own. It takes longer, it takes more work, but you can build your own and serve people there. The thing you were saying about like you helping your friends and then they come into town and be like, oh, let's do this. That's exactly how you do it. Like serve, like in the art community, service is currency. A lot of people owe people favors. The reason I've never been able to afford any of the things I put out. I'm never able to afford it, but people called on favors for me, and I also called on some favors for myself. And so go about serving people. Don't just go help someone with their project and keep on creating yours and stuff. But this is what I'll say, and this is what I advise people to do, because this is what I do. This is what I do, and this is what I know. Yeah, I'll stop there.
on service, right? I remember hearing this thing in school, and I think there are things you hear, and there are things you hear that hindsight makes them make a lot of sense in your life, right? And it's something I kind of like tell my cousins, younger people in my family or family friends. I tell them some things, and I'll be like, you know what? I'm pretty sure you will not understand what I'm saying, and it will just be like I like rambling. But I'm pretty sure in a couple of years it'll make sense to you. And what I'm trying to say is that somebody said that, paraphrasing, service is like depositing money, right, in a heart bank for you, right? And so if you are only a collector, you would soon not be able to pull any favors, right? You soon will not be able to pull any resources that doesn't come from, your own direct pocket and your own sweat and toil, right? However, once you serve people, it's like putting money in a high interest account, right? It is accruing interest. And on the days that you need help, I'm not saying this works for everything. I'm not saying that you should go and just start spamming people with acts of service so that you'll be able to cash out one day. No, it's not cash out. But the idea is that at some point in time, you will need people's help. And the help you have put, right, the service you have given would be meted out to you more than you. And sometimes it might not even directly be for you. I have been a blessing, or I have been a recipient of blessing from people who knew my parents, right? And what my parents have done. And I'm reaping of the benefits of like the good things that they have done for other people. And so it's something we have to put into consideration is that when you enter into the art space, and as believers, I don't think this should be our mindset, but it's usually a competitive space, right? It's like I need to do more work, better work than I've done, right? Usually so that I can be seen as better, right? But maybe enter these spaces with humility. Maybe enter these spaces with a willingness to learn, with a willingness to serve, right? And not just to push your stuff out there. And I'm pretty sure you'll see amazing things that you didn't even think happened. So that's like the talk of money, and we are going to have like a full blown money talk, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be fun. But I want to kind of like do some rapid fire things. I'll ask like some questions, and you just answer. It's like A, B. I think I have like 2-3 questions on that A, B, and let's see which one you answer. Maybe I'll ask one more question and then round up. Is that okay for you?
Perfect. I'm ready.
Okay. 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 So which of these do you prefer? Slow burner or instant blow?
Instant blow.
Okay. Uh, Underrated artist or super famous?
Underrated artist, definitely. What? Yes.
Okay, I don't have any other question. But like, why underrated?
Because like there's so much like, okay, I'm not glorifying suffering, but like the struggle is so good. It's so good for like the artists, like, and when they get to that point where they realize that nobody may ever clap for them for creating amazing work, but this is what they are here for, and they are just going to continue. Whoosh. When artists are on that level and just creating what they like, what they would like to listen to, what they would like to say to their children. I created this in 2018.
That's a different energy, yeah.
Oh, I underrated artists any day, anytime. And even the underrated artists, when they blow, the underrated artists that are blown, I still prefer. You know, when there's some people who are so big, yet like there's still so many like things in their body of work that they are not celebrated for. Nobody knows this. Like people, like there's still so much, like Billie Eilish. She's very big. She's like the biggest, but there's still so much about her artistry that nobody talks about. Phineas. There's so many artists like that are in like the very, very big, high and mighty space. But when you listen to their work, sometimes or see, sometimes like there's some things that they do even with the instruments that's telling the story that nobody ever hears. And you're like, wow, you took time to like create this detail when you knew nobody may ever hear this. But, I appreciate it. I always appreciate it.
I remember watching this interview, right? With what's his name, MI, and he was talking about winning an award for oh god, I've forgotten this song that he did that blew. It was in Pidgin. I've forgotten, like it's in my head, but maybe you put that in the comments or something. But it was like on that album, he had done like some amazing conscious work, right? That in his head, this has to be the thing that people love and appreciate. But it turns out that Undisputed Champion was what was winning awards. And it was like, if you listen to like the body of work, that was like the least thing he had hopes for. And this brings me to kind of like this other thing about success and about maybe expectations of success that we do not realize, is that when we reach points or critical mass where we get to the point where we blow, it is a test. It ends up for most people, or for a number of artists, being a test as to who they really are. And I'm not saying this in like the light of, are you going to still be Christian or not, right? More in the terms of, am I going to still put out music that I love and that I believe strongly in, even though I know, historically speaking, that they will not do so well? Or will I try to replicate that success that I just experienced? And for a lot of us, the validation of having a big hit or a big successful project um, turns out to be the thing that kind of like rules us. So I think in my final act or final question for you, and maybe I need to frame it because the idea is almost running away in the ether, but it is how do you handle the idea? I have been called to artistry, right? Maybe as a ministry, you get. What if I don't blow? Right? What if I don't blow? Have you had those thoughts and how do you handle that?
So one of the last poems I wrote is called The Gift of Ordinariness. So I've made peace with my ordinariness. I don't think there is anything very deep about me or something that should be in high demand or very scarce about what I do. Honestly, I think I write very ordinary things about ordinary people, regular people like me, that go through very regular, ordinary things. There's nothing very, there's nothing super special about me. I think that, yes, if I'm being very honest, and so because I've made peace with my ordinariness, I'm submitted to whatever is God's will for me with regard to that. To be very honest with you, Misa, whether I blow or not is not my business. And I've decided not to make it my business. I don't remember when they came to Jesus and they said to Jesus, "When will you then give the kingdom to us? Where would the kingdom be given to Israel and stuff?" And he said, it is not for you to know the times and seasons that God has kept in his own that's in God's exclusive preserve. And he said this, he says, "But ye shall be my witness, and but after that the Holy Spirit is gonna come upon ye shall be my witnesses." And after the Holy Spirit is come upon you, and shall be witnesses in all Jerusalem, Judea, and to the ends of the earth. So Jesus was telling them something there. He was saying that this one is not your business. This one is your business. It's not your business to know times and seasons. It's only God that knows this one. This one is your business. Go and be witnesses. So in the same way, in the same vein, I hear my Lord telling me, it's not my business whether my art is going to give me millions of followers or just 20. In God's eyes, he would ask me for the 20. The same way he asked those people with the talents. Those he gave one, the one he gave one to, he still asked him. So I'll still give account for what I did with the thing that God asked me. And making sure that I don't go back to God with what he gave me. That's my major business on this earth, to do business, to invest my talents and my skills and my gifts, and to use them and to return to God empty, having invested everything there. Those are the things that are really my business. And if my art is not giving me money, it is my business to make sure that I make money from other means and survive and take care of my family, take care of these are the things that occupy my mind. How would I make money? How will I survive? How would my family be fed? How will I pay my bills? If art is not going to do it, then maybe that's not where God wants me to get that from. Then I'll do this from here. However, I must still show up and serve people with the gifts and talents God gave me. But whether people will value my gifts, value is scarcity. Whether people will value my gifts to the extent where they'll be like, this deserves 20 million. And this or this deserves 2 million. I really don't know those things. I don't have that information, and I don't lose sleep thinking about it. So yes, that's honestly how I think about these things, and I will not lie. There's a very high probability that I may never be a big deal. And so in that case, I cannot be sleeping on the other things that I could have made money from. But even though that there's that possibility that I may not be a big deal, this art is still very powerful. God has still already committed 20 or 2 people into my hands, and I'll give account for how I serve those people. But these are the things I think about, and this is how I've simplified that thought. I've come to terms. I've made peace with that fact that it's not, if I make it my business, I'll do certain things I should not do to make it happen. I would sell my soul to make it happen. And I'm being honest, selling our souls does not necessarily mean we'll go to a river and we'll bow. Sometimes it's giving another thing the place of God, giving another thing the place of the King of Kings, giving his seat up to something else or someone else. And so yeah, some people may say I lack killer instinct, but listen to my work. The killer instinct is there. I put everything into it, but maybe I'm not. It's not that do or die when it's do or die when it comes to creating, but it's not necessary. It's not that do or die when it comes to acceptance. You know, I'm okay. I'll accept it if people say I didn't get this. You know, I didn't quite get this. This was not for me. You know, and everything. But yeah, that's how I think about it.
This has been an amazing conversation, Koli.
We did it.
Yeah. So before you go, I know that you just released an amazing body of work. And I know that yes, please do say so yourself, and allow us to also say it. So just tell us where we can get your work, right? Just talk about like some of the awesome work that you have been doing, and where people can get to meet you and stuff like that before we round up.
So you would find everything about my work on my social media pages. I'm at Man Like Koli almost everywhere, and I have a music project called Welcome to My Joy out on all music streaming platforms. It's on my YouTube channel as well. Please go have a listen. I put my entire heart and soul into it, and I hope you enjoy it. And I also recently put out a poetry book. It's on Seller. It's an ebook. You can download it. You can buy it, and I think it's been downloaded to your device when you buy it. And support me and my art and my work. And when I put out this music, it's called Welcome to My Joy because I wanted to talk about and share what my joy feels like, what it looks like. It's not always bright and bubbly and happy. Sometimes it is like the song Beautiful. Sometimes it's me questioning my faith, like declaring. It's many things. Sometimes it's basically me loving a girl, like Wanyoma, and so there's range in it. And if you're a person who likes words and really is into that kind of art, I think there's something there for you, definitely something there for you. My poetry book is called Now These Three Abide. And if you're familiar with scripture, you know the scripture that says, now these three abide, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest is love. And so the book is divided into 3 parts: love, faith, and hope. And I have poems along this kind of theme in each section. And then I collaborated with my cousin Ella. So there's also photography, abstract photography there. And go check me out. And I hope you guys like what you see. If you do, hit me up on my social media channels, and I'll be happy to write you back, correspond with you.
Please flood his stuff. I can vouch for it. It's amazing. It is amazing. Welcome to My Joy has an amazing. That was kind of why I used to walk through work. So I'm not giving cap reviews. So check out his stuff. You're going to be amazed. And till we see you same time tomorrow, have an awesome evening.